Welcome to the realest podcast you'll ever listen to. I'm LT.
I'm Kiki.
And we're here to talk blunt.
Black ladies, unequivocally North Tulsa. Let's talk blunt talk.
Hey, Kiki,
Hey.
What are we talking blunt about today?
Well, today I want to talk about the quiet resignation.
Okay.
Or the quiet quitting. Both terms I've heard.
Yes.
For me, I want to start with something that SHRM has kind of defined. Which SHRM is the Society of HR Management, and they do a lot with HR focuses and agendas, and so they are the experts, I suppose, and they call quiet quitting is real, but the root of the problem may lie in the organization, and they define it as an employee who is still working roughly but not engaged. They have some interesting statistics. They say that about 72% of quiet quitters are millennials. Don't know if that's true or not.
I see that.
But I definitely can see that. That's a, obviously they're the experts. 53% are hourly employees, 46% are salaried, which I think that's that's a small percent, difference in there. And then I guess it was shocking for me as a Gen Xer is that 31% of quiet quitters are Gen Xers. I don't know that people would expect, just because that's that 42 to 57 age group that, people might be a little more settled, but I think that may have something to do with how Gen Xers were raised, what they've seen.
That's
but
exactly what I was thinking.
For me, I think it has to do with work-life balance. And I would like to put a positive spin on it, because I think sometimes it's about aligning your career with your life. And how do employers change the quiet resignation and take some, I don't want to say, well, I guess, ownership, which is somewhat of what SHRM is saying, is that it lies within the organization and how the organization handles PTO, paid time off, family life changes, things that happen within an employee's life. How do we shift as employees' lives shift? And I think that's one of the things that millennials are teaching us in the workplace is it's not all about money. Mm-hmm. It's also about me being able to balance what I do on the weekends versus what I do at 8 to 5 versus, vacation, spending time with family. Whereas other generations like Gen X, we were taught to work. Mm-hmm. And I think that balance of work-life balance is important.
Yeah. So first of all, there is a lot to unpack in this topic. Before I go into that, I think you hit a really key piece. I'm so fascinated with generational studies. Like, that's something I would love to even just research out, because every generation is a product of the previous generation. So what you just said makes perfect sense to me, because when you think about Gen Xers, we were raised by the baby boomers, and we know we wanted a different lifestyle, but our lifestyle was about where we needed to get to, what we wanted to have. And yes, we wanted that balance, but achieving that goal was also top priority. Whereas our millennials and the generation coming up under them, I'm starting to lose focus on how many different generations are coming behind us now, but they're more focused on, because they've been given all these things, and so they can have all these things.
Given all these things?
Well, oh God, I didn't mean to get you all riled up already.
I'm just trying to understand, what were they given?
All the things that Gen Xers may have been trying to achieve, those are things that's just considered everyday life for them. So for them, what they did not have, what they did not see from us as Xers, was that work-life balance. So for them, that's what they long for. So that's top priority to them. That's where I'm going with that.
Okay.
Let's not go down that trail. We can save that for another day. But so, having said all that, that makes perfect sense to me what you said. But I want to go back to the quiet quitting in general. So we know that the whole quiet quitting came from um, off the ending of the pandemic and what we labeled the Great Resignation. And so then we get to the quiet quitting. And I think you unpacked a lot of things in there because it's quiet quitting, but then we also sometimes have loud quitting. And so I think some of the things that came to mind for me as you were talking about the quiet quitting or aligning your career is, first of all, what are we leaving for? Um, More importantly for me, don't start. Let me get it out. How do you leave? How do you exit? Because it's okay to exit, but how do you do it? When do you do it? Why? And then, most importantly, is everybody really looking for another job or another organization? Are there things that leaders and organizations can be doing to help a person fulfill what they're looking for without leaving the organization? And then how do we transition careers in general? So I think there's a lot to unpack in this topic. Great discussion.
Yeah, I mean, overall, what you just talked about was succession planning, which is another topic under itself. But I think it directly influences the Great Resignation and quiet quitting because I think in the United States, succession planning is sometimes at the C-suite level, but not at the mid-level manager level or even at the frontline level. Mm-hmm. So that's a lot of why you have a quiet resignation because people want to move into the C-suite or they want to move into mid-level management, but are being kind of like, well, you're so good at this, or we really need you here. So in order for them to feel like they can achieve that next level, sometimes they feel like, well, maybe I have to leave and then come back, or I have to leave in order to be able to do that. But you said something about how you leave, and I agree with that to an extent. I mean, I think number one, it's a very personal process. One, you have to kind of look within yourself. In my mind, what I would do and what I have done in the past is look at the pros and cons. Mm-hmm. What are you missing in your career now that you feel like leaving will do? Because if it's personalities, let me tell you, different face, different name, same personalities. They leave, you don't switch organizations to go because, oh, so-and-so's this and this person right. This and this person's right. That, because you're going to encounter those personalities wherever you go. Mm-hmm. But I do think that there's a difference between quiet quitting and telling folk, I need to make more money, so I'm looking, or, management's not hearing me, so I'm going to do this, or,
So is that what you would consider loud quitting?
And here's the challenge. I think people don't do it intentionally. I think they tell people who they assume are their friends or colleagues that they can trust. But the challenge is if you're working on a job, and this is just Kiki's opinion, and you've decided that you no longer want to work there, and so you're going to start strategically looking, my recommendation is that you shut your mouth, not in that you don't go to your coworkers and share, because that, even if it's a trusted coworker, it needs to be a mentor or someone in that organization or outside of the organization, preferably, who can help you think through those things that you believe are important. Because sometimes having, or even seeking counseling, I think we don't do enough career coaching. And so even seeking a career coach or a life coach, because it could be a combination of life issues as well as career issues. So you need some coaching, but to talk to your coworkers about it is a bad idea. Mm-hmm. One, you don't know, even people you trust may haphazardly slip up and say, oh, so-and-so said they was looking too. Okay, but did they tell you to share that? Because I've had conversations with people before. They're like, yeah, so-and-so looking. And I'm like, do they know you just told me they looking? Mm-hmm. Is that something they wanted to be known in the organization?
I agree. When I think about the difference between quiet quitting and loud quitting, I think it all comes down to professionalism. I really do. Because when I think about, because I think it is okay to be looking for a job. And I think it's okay for, first of all, let me say this, it should be okay. And I believe that part of, and that's one of the things that I think that leaders and organizations can do. You know, one of the conversations that I frequently have with people, especially my people that I know are very ambitious, is that I make sure that from the very beginning that they understand that I'm comfortable and I am here to help them grow and develop and look for their next opportunity. And I have had employees that do just that. Hey, I'm looking at this over here. I think when we make people feel like they can't go someplace else, then that's when they're going to do it secretly. I feel like, and I've always felt this way, the more you make it comfortable for them to have those conversations, it makes it easier for me to plan on how to replace you because I'm working with you. No, and I don't mean it badly, like replace you like that. I mean, like you're going to give me heads up. So like we're working together. And you may
might not happen for 3 years.
But that's okay. Because when you do come to me and tell me, I don't mean like replace you like before you leave. I mean like you tell me and give me enough time to where you may even be able to help train the person that's replacing you.
Yeah, the reality is I don't think that most managers can't handle that.
Well, and that's the issue because it can be done and it can be done very well. But that's a side note. But once again, you have to make it comfortable. When I think of loud quitting, I think of the people that are working that's completely dissatisfied. They're completely disengaged. They are resistant to the work. And I'm not just looking, but I'm talking about how unhappy I am and I'm pulling everybody else into it. So then it makes the atmosphere that everybody else is working in toxic. And that to me is the difference. And so that's where I say that it really borders around professionalism.
I agree, but I think there's another issue at play there because if you have someone that's bringing toxicity to the workplace, that's an issue for leadership to address, separate from quiet quitting. Because typically those people aren't the ones that are quitting. Those are the people who are going to be right there every single day complaining because they ain't got nowhere else to go.
Well, because I think you're right. And I think though, the reason why they become loud is because they feel like they're stuck. And they don't know how to channel where they may be at or how to make that maneuver. But I agree with you though, in it all comes back to management and how you address that, because you have to be very careful that you address it in a manner that does not offend your other employees that are there, that makes them feel, so you become the aggressor versus the person that's trying to settle the environment.
And sometimes
you got to manage the environment.
I do, and I think sometimes managers can manage the environment too much. I think there's a way to bring in your employee engagement resources. And that's where I think a lot of the managers miss the mark, is they try to, I'm gonna handle my department this way. And then when things start to blow up, they want to bring HR in. No, bring me in at the beginning when you start to recognize an issue. Don't bring me in when you have employees at each other's throats or you're ready to term someone because they did something and they want to quit anyway. So I just want to make it easy for them. No.
Agreed.
And so that's where I think as managers, oftentimes most organizations, not all, especially some of your smaller ones, but most organizations have several different avenues where managers can say, hey, something's going on with my department. I need some external intervention. And they need to feel comfortable stepping out and allowing HR or whoever the employee engagement team is to step in and provide some intervention that will also lead to you, manager, saying, hey, there's some things you need to do differently too, because we got some feedback from your employees and they're saying that one of the things they'd like to do is work from home more or be off on Fridays. And, you're resistant to that because of A, B, or C.
Right.
And so I think there's self-reflection that managers have to do, but I think managers also have to be prepared to step away when it's necessary.
So I agree with you. So a topic for another day for us is leadership, because obviously
no, this is a great topic for leadership.
so
actually,
you
this is a great topic for
your
leadership.
conversation with, your HR background, my leadership, is it can be a topic within itself. But I want to go back to a couple of things, because I think we only hit the surface of it. So I want to go back to, what are people leaving for? Let's start that. Let's go back. You hit on it a couple of you talked about work-life balance.
Mm-hmm.
And you also quoted SHRM, which is the human resource kind of experts.
Yeah.
And you talked about work-life balance. So according to SHRM, 29% of people leave for better work-life balance. 32% leave for better compensation. And then, of course, you've got your on down from there, better benefits. 21% is because of organizational leadership, lack empathy towards employers. And then there's where I just, one of the things that I really center around, which is workforce culture, which is a conversation within itself, which comes back to a lot of what you're talking about in that leadership, because we sometimes create those cultures that run people off. But I think there's a big bucket there that's between compensation and work-life balance. I sometimes, and some of these other things that we're talking about, especially the culture and the leadership, I think a lot of times, and the work life balance, I think a lot of times people go out there looking for that, and they find better compensation. And then a lot of times what you see reported as you're in your exit interviews is compensation, because I really don't want to talk about those other things. I don't know how to express it. So I actually think that probably more than 29% of people leave for a better work-life balance.
I agree, because how many employers are doing exit interviews realistically?
Right.
Like, are you doing it on the last day?
Yeah.
And why are you doing it on the last? So I think the exit interview itself is an issue, because I think once people give their notice, a lot of employers, they disengage. That last 2 weeks can be very uncomfortable, because that's why a lot of people, they will put in their notice and request to work and request PTO for the last 2 weeks, because it gets very uncomfortable.
That's an organizational problem, right there.
It is an organizational problem.
So you bring up a good point, because these numbers, most organizations don't do exit interviews or stay interviews, which I think is better than exit interviews, but that's a whole nother conversation. Most of them, and where probably most of the HR suites are bringing this data from, is not necessarily an exit interview. Most of it is where the associate gives their boss their resignation of that reason, and then when they fill out their leaving papers, they have to put in those reasons, which is rarely really the reason.
Yeah.
So I would agree that probably a lot of it. So if we think most of it is work-life balance, what do you think that we're looking for in work-life balance? Because you see a lot of employers now, that is a catchphrase for recruitment. Come join our organization, work-life balance. What does that really mean? What are we looking for?
Being able to make it to my kid's game and not be late. That's what it means. Being able to go back to school, if that's something that I want to do, and not feel like I have to, if I have a class that starts at 6:00 online and my hours are 8 to 5, I'm running late to class because my boss decided to call me at 5:45, knowing that I'm enrolled in school, and then placing this priority on me of, oh yeah, I know you, yeah, but I just think this is emergency, or just one thing I'm working on and I got to get it to my boss. There's always something else. So not respecting boundaries. I think that's one of, for me, what work-life balance is about boundaries. It's about understanding my lunch break, my ending time. And I'm not saying I walk out the door at 5:00. I rarely do I do that. But I am saying that my employer should be encouraging me to walk out the door at 5:00, and that the building is not going to catch on fire if I don't. I mean, I think we just have to do better as employees, managing up and letting managers. One of the first things I do when I started a new job, or even is I go in and I block out my lunch hour. And I don't do that because I take a lunch hour.
You get lunch hours?
Exactly. Okay. I don't do that because I always take a lunch hour, but at least can I just have 1 hour to decompress? I may have to sit there. It's probably a working lunch where I'm going through emails or whatnot, but at least in my mind, I'm saying, please don't schedule a meeting for 12 o'clock.
Well, I could schedule it for 5 o'clock.
You could. But on the flip side, I also go in at 5 o'clock and put wrap up, meaning I'm wrapping up my day from 4:30 to 5.
That means something?
To me, it does.
Oh, okay. Just checking.
It's putting boundaries on. You'd be surprised. If you haven't tried it, try it. Because you'll be surprised. If you intentionally block your calendar at the very beginning of the day.
Actually, I do.
And so you're not
in the middle.
And you're not respecting. So you're not respecting your own boundaries. That's what that is. That's on you, not your employer.
No. When people have meetings that are top. Anyway, let's not go down there.
I'm just saying, in order to have a boundary, you got to respect your own boundary.
So how do you exit?
For me, and we probably have different ones, but some tips I have for quiet resignation, and I'm just going to put these out here because I think they've worked in the past for me as well as other people that I've coached through this process. Number one, do your homework. Mm-hmm. If you're looking at switching careers, understand, like you said earlier, what does that mean going into another career? Because it may look from the outside like you're getting more work-life balance or you might be making more money. But when you start to add up benefits, commute, working remote, if that means you having to make adjustments at home to work remote or clear out space for an office, it could actually cost you more. So think about those things. Also,
so evaluate your reasons. Evaluate your reasons. Like, yeah. What is leading it? What's driving it?
Right. So avoid a knee-jerk decision. Meaning, absolutely. If there's an event that happens, understand that that event doesn't necessarily have to be. It might be the catalyst, but try to refrain from walking out. Mm-hmm. Do things always, if it's possible, to give a 2-week notice. Absolutely. Because you don't ever want to burn a bridge. Even if you think, I'm never going back, you don't want to burn a bridge.
So that's a great point. And I just kind of want to hone in on that just a little bit. Because you bring up a very good point. I mean, and in a lot of professional jobs, you have to give a 30-day notice. And mm-hmm. so you need to know your company's policy. Yep. And for your role. But you never, to your point, want to burn a bridge. And not even with just that organization. You don't know when you may meet some of those bosses in another organization, or who knows those bosses in another organization. So I think that's something we really, really want to stress, is that I think that you need to not wait until you're at a point where you're so angry. You really need to start evaluating your choices early so that you don't feel like you're up against a place where you're ready to just walk out and leave and not give a full notice.
Right.
So I think that's important. And I think it's important not to let a new job pressure you, or you feeling like you've got to start that new job sooner, because most organizations that are hiring you, they expect for you to be able to give your company whatever that appropriate resignation time is, and they're going to work with you. If it's the right job, they're going to work with you to give your organization the right.
So along those lines, I'm going to step out of the tips for just a minute. One of the things I think when you were talking about your notice and giving a 2-week mm-hmm. notice, include in that notification downtime for yourself between mm-hmm. jobs. So if you've agreed, before you accept the offer and before you put in your notice, think about, how much time will I need to transition? What do I have going on in my life that I need to reset? So ideally it's 2 weeks. You've got 2 weeks from your last gig to your new gig. But if it doesn't work out, at least try to get in 1 week. It makes a difference in how you approach your new job. It makes a difference how you approach your new colleagues. When you go straight into one job from another job, it's just, it feels hectic. And so if you can, I would recommend individuals I'd recommend folks building in some transition time between jobs.
I agree with that. That's good advice, and I think a lot of times we fail to do that. I would agree with that. That's some good sound advice. It makes you the healthiest you can be going into
Right.
that new adventure and path. And so I would agree with that. That's a good call out. So what else do you think to make the transition smooth?
So we talked about not making a knee-jerk decision. In order to do that, we spoke earlier about seeking advice from mentors, not talking necessarily to people within your organization, but who is in your trusted circle that has maybe advised you before, or do you have a life coach or a career coach, someone who you can trust, folks who you can trust to give you some sound advice. Like, consider if in your next career move, do you need to or want to go back to school? I think a lot of times we think, well, I need to pick up a certain skill, so I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to get a certificate. That may be the case, but as you write out your pros and cons and what you want in your next job, consider if maybe you have transferable skills that you can utilize and save yourself some money on the back end of going back to school. But if the decision is yes, I need to go back to school, then think about what difference that'll make. Where's the money going to come from? How are you going to pay for school? And what does that look like with your current family dynamics?
So I like that. That's also some good sound advice. So along those lines, what started resonating for me there is that a lot of times we think about going back to school or getting certifications or things like that for extra pay. And so I think to your point, you really need to evaluate what you need, why you need that, and let it be about fulfillment for you. So I know for me, every single time I've decided to go back to school, and there's been many, and every single time I decided to get a certification, and there's been many, it's always been about me. It's not because somebody dangled a carrot in front of me. If that came along, great. But it was all about my path and what I wanted for me, not about what I expected it was going to get me. Because sometimes I think we get very frustrated because we get this extra degree and then like we expect, I've had employees come to me like, okay, am I going to get a raise because now I have this degree? There is nothing in your job description that said you were required to get that. No one owes you any more money. You should do it for the betterment of you. And everything I've ever done has been about, and I know you're waiting.
Yeah.
But, because I know we've had this debate before, but it's about me and building my resume to feel good about me and where I'm going and where I want to go, and never expecting for anybody to give me anything along the way. So go ahead.
Well, and I think that's the whole premise of quiet resignation or quitting, is because people do obtain additional skills. And yes, they do want recognition for it. You may not need it for the job.
Congratulations.
Right. You may not need it for the job, but as the employer, you're benefiting from that indirectly or directly. I've had people who go back to school and get certifications and, okay, yeah, we can expand your role to do this, but that expansion doesn't include more pay. So that's why people, and in that case,
but it gave you more skills.
And in that case, I say it might be time for you to look at quiet resignation. Because if that employer is not willing to not necessarily congratulations, but put some money behind it, or put some a career promotion behind it, and that's what you want, it may not be that organization. You have, just like you outgrow a pair of shoes, you've outgrown that organization. And it's time for you to have a real conversation with yourself about what do I want to do next.
That's right.
And so you can always choose. It's always, in my opinion, better to look for a job when you have a job than when you don't.
Agreed.
So if you've gone on and improved your career, or however you said it, then now is the time for you to evaluate, have I outgrown this position?
Right.
And if you've done the math and you see that, you know what, I'm ready for the next level, but maybe people who know you over a span of time, yeah, you got your degree, but we still need you to just grow a little bit more. Or why don't you step back into this role and prove you can do this? Prime example, before I got my degree, I had somebody tell me, well, go get a certificate first. And then, why am I going to go get a certificate and then get a degree in the same thing. I mean, albeit it may have made sense, but you know what? I chose that was not the route for me. If I had to spend money going back to school and I would not be eligible for assistance through anything, I might as well go back to school for a degree that I knew that I could advance in than a certificate that might advance me.
And that is why you lead us into the next point, which is, when do you exit? And I agree, that may be time for you to evaluate. But I want to be very clear. And this is one of those blunt talks, and maybe we have a difference of opinion, but a degree doesn't necessarily equal the next step. And that's what people have to fail to realize. It's not just a degree that gets you where you're going.
I agree.
It's the degree plus the skill set and knowing how to utilize it. And so many times we just get the degree, and I'm just gonna be honest, especially the generation coming up, like they want to zoom through school and keep getting the degrees back to back, haven't really worked to put any skills or actions with it. That doesn't equal the job.
And I know we're talking about quiet resignation, but I have employers to look at that as well, because job descriptions have become so vague.
They are vague.
That they make people think, all I need is a bachelor's degree. And the reality is they're looking for a master's. Whatever's in the preferred is what I would suggest you look at. Because that under basic is just basic. Yeah. And they are really looking, if they're saying preferred advanced degree, preferred so many years of experience, more than likely, that's what that manager is actually looking for, although they will consider other things. But that's where people get, I got my bachelor's degree. This job says I can do this. It didn't say I needed 10 years of experience. It said I needed 1.
So there's 2 caveats to that. So you are right. You should really look at the preferred. And let me tell you why that, especially you're seeing it more and more today, that required versus preferred is there for a couple of scenarios. One, it might be a person who does have some experience there that's willing to go back to school to get to that preferred that we may not want to miss out on. But 9 times out of 10, that's set for the internal candidate. That this is it depends on the organization, but the values of the organization, it's for that person that we don't want to dismiss and bring in somebody from the outside when there's somebody that already knows the organization, that they don't have that preferred, but they may be willing to go get that preferred. So it's you leave that clause for special, and you know this being from HR, you leave that clause for special considerations, and especially, we're not going to have this conversation today, but especially in the era right now of DEI, you leave it for that special candidate that you can do that with.
Yeah, that's another topic.
Yeah, that's
but DEI is a whole
but I'm just
area.
saying that's one of the reasons why you leave it. But the other thing though, so I get what you're saying, but it's not the people that have the bachelor degrees that I was originally talking about. I'm talking about the people who do have the preferred. Just because you have that preferred degree don't mean you have the preferred skill set. That's all I'm saying. So because I've hit that preferred, I'm automatically supposed to be in that role. That's a no.
Again, I say if that's how you feel, you need to
then it's
start looking.
And that's when do you exit.
Yeah.
That's when you exit.
So to wrap up tips, because we could do this on and on,
Sure.
I would say as you put together your resume, consider a professional resume writing.
Yes. Please.
They're not all equal. So do your homework. If you consider a professional resume writing firm or someone who writes resumes, it's important that they have a process where they either interview you or go through and ask questions, because you're not setting up for the job you have. You're setting yourself up for the next job. So it's important to do that.
It's really nice when you have friends that write their resumes too.
Anyway.
It's good to know people.
Anyway.
Can AI write my resume?
No. You can do an AI generated cover sheet, but you want to make sure you go in and personalize it, because employers have gotten smart and they know that's the thing now. People pop in an AI cover letter or in even a resume, but the thing of it is, we're up against kind of that AI bot that lets your resume through, and the manager that sees it and goes, what?
What are you talking about?
So you have to be careful and make sure that if you do use AI as a tool, a resource, that you also personalize that resume or letter.
And I would say the professionals and the higher of the positions that you're looking at, your resume really is your ticket through the door. Like you're not even going to get that interview if your resume don't say the right things, because you got too many resumes coming in for those jobs. And so that's what's going to be screened to even get you to that leader.
Yeah. Another thing, and probably my last tip, is going to be, as you start to work on your resume, start to flesh out about 6 references, 3 of which should be supervisors that you know very well and that you feel comfortable approaching when the time comes to say, I'm being considered for a position that I'm very interested in, and would you be okay if I utilize you as a reference? Don't use anyone that you don't know well. And I'll say that again. Don't use anyone. Just because you work with someone does not necessarily mean that they will give you a good reference. So just be mindful. Most jobs now want at least 4 references, and usually 2 or more have to be supervisors. So understand what that means. Do the research on the organizations and get your references lined up well before you even start applying for a job, because it's not that, again, it's that preparation of, if this is going to happen, but when it happens, I want to have to be able to put my best foot forward.
I want to reiterate what you said about doing your homework on the organization and understanding. Like, you need to walk into an interview, especially when you're an external applicant. You need to be walking into hopefully if you're internal, you already know the organization. But if you're external, you need to be walking in there, because it's all about, do you know their mission and their values, and do you align with it? First of all, you need to know for yourself, not even to be able to be prepared for the interview, but you need to know for yourself, especially if you're transitioning jobs or careers from a place where you've already been established. You need to make sure that this place where you're going, you align with it, because the last thing you want to do is transition to a place that you do not align with their core values and their mission. So as we look to wrap up, I just want to kind of a little bit talk about, do you think that there's that, and I think we touched on this a little bit earlier, but leaders or organization have in any way the ability to, I don't want to say prevent, because when it's time for a person to go, it's time for a person to go, but those people that are like a little bit on the fence, looking for a little bit of more fulfillment, that leaders or organization and the way they, value employees, have the succession plan, and as you talk about, can make a difference in people leaving.
Well, I think an employer can always choose to counter an employee pay if they go into and they have accepted a job, say, that has 5 to 10% more. Depending on, what that employee is doing, I've seen where the employers come back and said, okay, we'll match that. You don't have to start over with your PTO. You don't have to start over with your seniority. We'll match your pay, and things keep going on as usual. It depends on what's motivating that employee to leave, for the employer to be able to retain them. I think at some point in time, though, for some people who choose to quietly quit or resign, they've made up in their mind that this is no longer a position that I want to hold. They've hopefully done an evaluation of potential positions in the organization that might fit their skill. And if it's an organization that there's not a lot of turnover, or the positions, it's a small organization where, there's not a lot of new positions being created or opportunities, then at that point, how the employer can best support them is just to understand that, like you said much earlier, it's, this employee is looking for growth, and we're going to support that growth. If an opportunity comes forward internally, great. But if not, we're going to encourage them to continue to do what they feel is best for their career, without them feeling as if they're going to lose their job if, for whatever reason, their employer finds out that they put in another application somewhere.
Yeah, and I think my question was more around the proactive. I am not a fan of, I think it's a slippery slope to start dangling money when a person has already turned in their resignation. I'm not a fan of that. I feel like if you're already out there and you're already looking, before you get to that point, and I think I think an organization should have proactive succession planning for all. And I think it's a slippery slope to have somebody go find a job and come in and then you go to countering, because then that becomes the norm of what people expect.
Not necessarily.
It can. It's a slippery slope. Is what I said.
But that's what I said. It depends on the employee and what the position is. It's not always even possible. But if the employer chooses to do that, that's done all the time.
But if you value me, it needed to already. That's just me. It needed to already be in place.
And the employer may not have
walking out the door.
They may not have known you were looking. There could be several.
But that's my point. I shouldn't have to be looking. I think that's the whole point. Is there things, or the point of my question? Is there things that organizations should have in place to where when a person's not feeling fulfilled, they have, they have career coaches and things like that they can reach out to, whatever organization may call it, that can help them navigate without getting to the point that they have to come in and say, I found a job.
Yes, I agree. But quiet quitting really isn't about the employer. It's about the employee. And so for me, in my context, I'm looking at the employee and how you can be productive at the job you currently have, be respectful of the role and the leadership there, and continue to look for that career that aligns with what you have chosen to do next. If it's in that organization, great. If it's not, then make those moves very strategically, very quietly, and just do the work.
So I totally agree with everything that you've said. I think that's the difference between quiet quitting and loud quitting, as we talked about earlier. I have all the respect in the world for someone who quietly quits in a professional manner, as you discovered. The opposite is where I have concerns. So I think we've given some valuable tips in an era coming off the pandemic of the quiet resignation, or as you say, the quiet quitting. And I think it's a wrap.
Yeah. Just remember, we've got these nice t-shirts.
Yes.
All colors.
Yes.
So if you want a blunt top, link in bio. And also don't forget to send us the topics that you want to discuss.
Yes.
Because that's what this is a platform for discussion on broad topics that impact us all.
Absolutely. It's Blunt Talk.
That's a wrap.
It's been real.